Hi guys, so this week we've been talking about half steps and whole steps and accidentals, and I wanted to show you guys a little bit more about these concepts in noteflight.com, which is our notation software, so you guys can see a few different ways to notate accidentals and half steps and whole steps on the staff. And I also want to mention a few rules that are interesting to know about accidentals. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to go start writing like every half step from C4, which is middle C, all the way to C5, which is the next C after that. So we're going to start with C, and now I'm going to write the next half step up. So if we were to write C and we want to make it a half step higher, we're gonna make it sharp, and I'm gonna write a sharp next to that, and then next note would be a D natural, and now I'm gonna write D, but half step higher than D natural is D sharp. So I'm just once again going half step by half step up all the different notes. So the next one will be E natural, and there's already a half step between E and F natural, so I'm gonna write that. And then now from F natural, if we want to raise that a half step, we're gonna go to F sharp, and next is gonna be G natural. And now we're going to go to G sharp. That's half step higher than F, G natural. So from G sharp, we're going to go to A natural. And then one half step more is going to be A sharp. And now B natural is next. And finally, the last value in this group of notes is going to be C of the next octave, which is called, and I'm going to make that a whole note just so that it takes up the whole bar. Okay, so you see we have C, C sharp, D, so we have C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F natural, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B natural, C. So this is actually what's called a chromatic scale. And a chromatic scale is just basically every half step between one the note name to the next one once we go all the way around the musical alphabet. So it's always, a chromatic scale is always going to have 12 notes until we come around all the way to the same note an octave higher. So you can see 4, another 4, 8, and then 12. And then finally, another C. So now we could write the same scale using flats instead. Now, instead of writing C sharp, let's start it down here actually. And I'm going to start from C natural. And now, instead of writing C sharp, what if I wrote D flat? Right? Okay, so now D flat and C sharp is exactly the same pitch. It's just a different enharmonic spelling. Remember that term from the lesson? So now, what if I write D now? Now, here is an interesting rule of accidentals, and it's one that is really important to mention that the lesson didn't talk about. When you write an accidental on the staff, that accidental actually carries over to any other note of the same letter name unless you change it with another accidental in front. So for example, here I wrote D and I wrote a flat in front of that D. I've written another D here, but because we already wrote D flat here and I wrote another D, that flat is actually carrying over to the next D. And that rule, when an accidental carries over to all of the same letter names within one single bar. So if I have written the D in this next bar, it would have gone back to the default for this, which is D natural. But just be mindful that I wrote D flat, so this next D, which is within the same bar, the same measure, it's also going to be D flat, even though I haven't written a flat in front of it. So this is our important rule of accidentals that is very commonly found in music. So now, if I want to make a half step higher than D flat, this is where writing D natural is going to help. So that D natural is going to cancel out. Writing the natural symbol in front of this D is going to cancel out that D flat that I wrote in here. So this is no longer going to be D flat now, it's going to be D natural. If I had removed it, it would have still be D flat, and then we wouldn't have actually changed the pitch at all. So just be mindful of that. So now I'm going to write E flat instead of D sharp here. And now take a look. I'm going to just write E now, and because we're on the next bar, that flat that I wrote for E flat is not going to carry over to this E because we're in a new measure. So I won't actually have to change the, I won't have to write an accidental to this because by default, every note that I wrote on the staff is going to be natural unless I write an accidental in front of it. And because we're in a new bar now, this is now E natural and I don't have to change it. So I'm going to write F natural, but this time instead of F sharp, I'm going to write G flat and G. This is still G flat technically because this flat is carrying over to the next one. We're still within that same bar, so I'm going to make that G natural. All right, and now I'm going to write A flat instead of G sharp and A natural to cancel out that A flat, and next is going to be B flat and another B, but this time I'm going to write B natural to cancel out the B flat here, and finally C natural, and I'm going to make that a whole note to complete the 4/4 bar. All right, so these two scales are exactly the same in terms of sound, in terms of pitch, but they're written with different enharmonic spellings. This one is written with sharps, and this one's written with flats, and I also had to use naturals to cancel out the flats along the way so that I could undo that rule, which is that whenever you write an accidental in a bar, the next time you write the same letter name within that one bar, that accidental is going to carry over to that note as well. So just remember that. This would have also applied here. If I had made this G sharp, this, see, we used to have C sharp here, but because we wrote it here, this one got removed from this one because it's already assumed that this is going to be C sharp because we wrote it here. If we wanted to make that natural, we would have to write this, okay? But I'm going to go back and change that to natural. I actually don't need to even write anything here. And the last thing I want to do is I want to play this entire section so you guys hear that both of these scales are exactly the same. All right, let's play from here. So you hear this is the same scale but written with flats and naturals instead. All right, so the last thing I want to mention here is if you look at this, any two adjacent notes, meaning any two notes that are right next to one another in this scale are going to be a half step apart. Those two notes are a half step apart. These two notes are a half step apart right here. So any two notes that are right next to each other are half step apart. Now, whole step, we'd have to skip over one note. So every other note in this scale is going to be a whole step apart. And let's see, this pair. See, we're skipping the note in the middle, and we're just doing every other note now. So you see, when you're working with a chromatic scale or a scale of half steps, any two adjacent or any two notes that are right next to each other are going to be half steps, and every other note is going to be a whole step. So just remember that. The same thing applies down here on this one.